Thank you. This is Brock Lawley. I'm the Atheist Antidote. I warn you, audience, today might be a little bit wonky, but I think this is worthy doing because I've had some interesting conversations with some younger Americans. And like I would suspect, they're leading with their hearts, they're leading with their emotions, not altogether a bad thing, but unfortunately, when you lead with that and you have no substantial foundation, you can get yourself in a lot of trouble. So says history. So what I decided to do is at least take a stab at it. And what I'm going to take a stab at is making a case for how fiscal responsibility works and the moral responsibility of thinking about these things with some seriousness. So, for example, everything is always framed in, if you poll Americans and you say, hey man, do you think we have a spending problem? Do you think we have too much debt? They'll have thought into their little Rolodex of mind. They'll be like, I think I heard something like that one time. Yeah. I think so. Yeah. We have a spending problem. We have a debt problem in this country. So you poll Americans, 80, 90% of the people say that. You got the crazy economists from the New York Times that say we should spend more money, but there are a very, very fringe portion of people that will at least vocalize that voluntarily. But then if you say, hey, what should we cut? And if you mention or whisper or allude to anything that touches their skin, their flesh, their bank account, no way, Jose, right? And that's, of course, as all this time. I want my bacon sizzling on the frying pan, but at the same side of the other side of the mouth, we have a problem with spending. But here's what I don't think a lot of Americans, especially younger Americans, because they weren't taught to think, they were told what to think, they weren't taught to think. And this does require that. It requires you to step back, look at things with some foresight, and get a reasonable gauge on, first of all, what human beings actually do, and then what are the consequences of that, and then what can we do to best put ourselves in a good situation. And so when you talk about taxes, the left has really, really mastered this rhetorically. To be like, oh, there are these rich people. How in the world are we going to give these rich people tax cuts? I mean, it's totally unfair. You are making $10, $15 an hour. This guy's making $4 million a year. How are we going to give this guy tax cuts? The government needs money. But the question that the conservative or anybody with an inquisitive mind should immediately ask is, well, is the goal to get more money? So let's say for this instance that we just yield that the government is the place to have all this money, that the government should be the arbitrator of all this money, and they should be the guy doling this out. Let's just yield that for a second. Well, in order to dole that out, they actually need what? Money. They need revenue flowing in. So the left is going to make the case that if you if you tax all these rich people, then you're going to have money, right? On its face, the difficult thing about this argument is on its face, that seems to make sense, especially when you have no economic education and you have no depth of thought. But history, time and time again, proves that just the opposite is what actually generates real revenue. So, for example, if you cut taxes, and I'm talking across the board, the left, when people talk about the tax cut, actually everybody's getting a tax cut. They lie to you if they say otherwise. But certainly the wealthier Americans are getting more of a tax cut because the wealthier Americans, again, you've been lied to, are paying far more taxes than everybody else. And of course, that's just the way the system's set up. It should be a flat tax, but it isn't. So anyway, that is a fact. So, the rich in some states are yielding 60, 70% of the tax burden. That's just a fact. You can look that up. That's an actual fact. Look at government documents. So what happens is if you cut that tax, that money gets poured into the economy. That just absolutely happens. Whether it be people buying plush new things, whether it be people trying to come up with inventive ways of making more money. Scrooge McDuck would try to make more money, etc. Well, as that happens, people start to work. Where people were taking, now they're working and they're giving. Does this make sense? So say you're Joe Sixpack sitting in your dirty underwear in your parents' basement playing video games because, let's just be honest, the economy has nothing to offer you by way of a job. You might even have some liberal arts degree in your back pocket, but it's doing you no good in this cesspool of an economy. But all of a sudden, let's say Scrooge McDuck doesn't have to pay $15 million to the U.S. government this year, and he can turn that into whatever. Maybe it's a video game company or something. Well, now Dirty Underpants guy, he has a job. So instead of taking 30 grand from the government, he's getting 30 grand from Scrooge McDuck. And he's paying taxes on that money. So here's where the real revenue starts to roll in. Not only is this guy not taking 30 grand out of the treasury every year, but so we have that 30 grand that we didn't spend on Dirty Underpants video game playing unemployed guy, but we're also getting another 5 to 10 grand on his tax portion. Does this make sense? So now the government is up 40 G's. And this just happens over and over and over and over again. And here's the irony, and you can look through history. You can look at this as a fact, as an economic fact, like gravity. All of a sudden, even though you didn't raise taxes, which is the only way the left thinks you can generate revenue into the coffers, even though you didn't raise taxes, you have more revenue in the coffers than you did, because economic vibrancy, which is the only way you actually create wealth, has happened, which has generated a further and richer tax base, which has generated richer and richer federal coffers. This requires some thought, I grant you that, but it's very important that you share this kind of thinking. It's very important that you open your mouth, because it does require a little bit of time, unlike the leftist platitude, oh, tax the rich, everybody's trying to screw you, only Uncle Sam's got your best interest in mind. Don't pay attention to the great and powerful. Don't look behind the curtain. Listen, guys, we got to get out there. We got to do the groundwork. We got to start educating people. Thank you for listening to the Atheist Antidote Show.
You are listening to the Atheist Antidote Show.